I never thought I would tell this story to anyone. For years I carried this weight alone, not knowing if it was my own madness or if something had really happened that defied all logic. But today, after so much time, I need to get it off my chest. I need you to help me understand what really happened to my husband. My name is Helena, I'm 42 years old, and this story began exactly 15 years ago when I was 27 and had just married the man I thought was the love of my life. Ricardo was everything I had always dreamed of: caring, intelligent, good-humoured. He worked as an engineer at a technology company and had this passion for adventures that enchanted me. He always talked about exploring unknown places, discovering new things. We lived in a small town, one of those where everyone knows each other. It was the kind of place where you leave your front door open and know that nothing will happen. Ricardo loved going for walks in the nearby mountains, especially on a trail he had discovered a few months before he disappeared. He said that there he found a peace he couldn't explain. It all started on a Tuesday morning. I remember perfectly because it was the day we always went shopping together. Ricardo woke up earlier than normal, which was already strange because he always complained about having to get up before 8. He was agitated, restless, as if something was deeply bothering him. "Honey, are you okay?" I asked, noticing that he was nervously fidgeting with his hands. "I'm fine, I need to resolve something today. Do you mind if I go alone on the trail? I need to think. I found it strange, but I didn't insist. We all need some time alone sometimes, don't we? How wrong I was. If I had known it would be the last time I would see him for the next 10 years, I would have done everything differently." Ricardo left home around 9 in the morning. I remember he gave me a longer kiss than normal, looked into my eyes in a different way, as if he was saying goodbye forever, but at the time I interpreted it as affection. The hours passed. Noon, no Ricardo. 1 in the afternoon, I started to worry. 3 in the afternoon, I called his cell phone for the 20th time, but it kept going straight to voicemail. At 5 in the afternoon, I couldn't stay still at home anymore. I went to the entrance of the trail where he always went. I asked some people if they had seen a dark-haired, tall man wearing a blue jacket. No one had seen anything. That's when desperation really began to take hold of me. At 6 in the afternoon, I called the police. The sheriff, an older man who knew my family, said it was too early to consider it a disappearance. Maybe Ricardo had decided to extend his walk. Maybe he had gotten lost and was coming back. "Wait until tomorrow," he said. That was the longest night of my life. I stayed awake until dawn, looking out the window, waiting to see his silhouette appear on the street. But the sun rose, and Ricardo didn't come back. The next day we organised a search. Friends, neighbours, even people we barely knew volunteered to help. We scoured every inch of that trail, called his name until we were hoarse. We found his blue jacket hanging on a branch about 3 kilometres from the entrance. Just that. No other sign. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The police opened an official investigation, but they never found concrete clues. Some people whispered theories, that Ricardo had run away with another woman, that he owed money to someone, dangerous, that he had had some kind of nervous breakdown. Each theory hurt me more than the previous one. I refused to accept any of them. I knew my husband. I knew every expression on his face, every mannerism. He would never abandon me like that. Something had happened to him on that trail. Something terrible. The first year was devastating. I cried every night, blaming myself for not insisting on accompanying him. I stopped working, stopped taking care of myself. My parents begged me to consider the possibility that Ricardo wouldn't come back anymore, but I couldn't. I couldn't give up on him. The second year was when anger arrived. Anger at the police for giving up the searches. Anger at friends who stopped talking about Ricardo as if he had never existed. Anger at him for leaving me alone, even knowing it wasn't his fault. From the 3rd to the 5th year, I tried to rebuild my life. I went back to work, did therapy, even went on some dates. But there was always a part of me that was waiting. Waiting for a call, a clue, a miracle. From the 6th to the 9th year, I slowly began to accept that maybe Ricardo really wouldn't come back anymore. Not that I believed he had abandoned me, but maybe he had really died on that trail, and his body would never be found. It was a different pain, but at least it allowed me to start making peace with the situation. And then came the 10th year. It was an ordinary Thursday. I was at home, preparing dinner and watching television, when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I thought it might be some neighbour or delivery person. I opened the door and my world collapsed. Ricardo was there. The same way he was 10 years before, exactly the same way. I'm not exaggerating when I say exactly. The same. Same height, same weight, same haircut, same expression on his face. Even the clothes were the same ones he was wearing the day he disappeared, a white t-shirt and jeans that I recognised immediately. The only difference was his eyes. His eyes had a strange depth, as if they carried memories of places I could never imagine. I stood at the door for an eternal 10 seconds, unable to process what I was seeing. My mind simply refused to accept it. It was impossible. After 10 years, people change. They age, they gain weight, lose hair, develop wrinkles. But Ricardo was identical. "Helena," he said, and his voice was exactly the same. "Can I come in?" As if it were the most normal thing in the world. As if he had gone out to buy bread and was coming home. I broke down. I collapsed on the floor, crying uncontrollably. 10 years of pain, of longing, of questioning all came out at once. Ricardo crouched down and hugged me, and his smell was the same. His touch was the same. It was really him. When I finally managed to control myself, thousands of questions began to arise in my mind. Where had he been? Why hadn't he gotten in touch? How was it possible that nothing had changed about him? "Where were you?" was the first thing I managed to ask. Ricardo looked at me with those strange eyes and answered something I will never forget. "I don't know how to explain, Helena. I'm not sure if you'll believe me. After 10 years, I'll believe anything. Just tell me what happened." He took a deep breath and began to tell the most bizarre story I've ever heard in my life. According to Ricardo, that day on the trail, he had walked farther than he usually did. He said he felt attracted to a path he had never seen before, as if something was calling him. He followed this path until he reached a circular clearing, completely isolated from the surrounding forest. In the centre of the clearing, there was a strange structure. He described it as a kind of portal made of ancient stones, covered with symbols he had never seen. And from inside this portal emanated a soft, almost hypnotic light. "I know it sounds crazy," he said, "but it was as if I had no choice. Something pulled me into that light." According to him, on the other side there was a place different. It wasn't another planet, it wasn't another dimension in the science fiction sense. It was as if it were the same world, but in a different version. A version where time didn't pass in the same way. Ricardo said that there he found other people who had also disappeared from their lives, coming from different eras. Some had been there for decades, others for centuries, but all maintained the same appearance as when they arrived. It was like a place of transition, he explained. There were people who told me they had been there for more than 100 years, waiting to return. But time doesn't exist in the same way in that place. He told me that in this place, people lived in a kind of community. They didn't need to eat, they didn't age, they didn't sleep. They just existed, waiting for something that no one knew exactly what it was. "And why did you come back now?" I asked. "Because I finally understood that my time to return had come. There was a feeling, a certainty that it was the right moment." I confess that my first reaction was to think that Ricardo had gone crazy, that maybe he had had some kind of mental breakdown and spent those 10 years in a psychotic fugue. But looking at him, seeing that he was exactly the same, without any sign that a decade had passed, I began to question my own sanity. In the following weeks, I tried to convince Ricardo to seek medical help, to talk to the police, to explain his disappearance, but he refused. He said that no one would believe it, and that maybe it was better that way. You want me to believe that you spent 10 years in a magical place where time doesn't pass? I asked in one of our conversations. I don't want you to believe anything, he replied. I just want you to know that I never wanted to abandon you, that during all this time, even without understanding where I was, you were the only thing I could think about. This touched me deeply, but there were still so many unanswered questions. How was it possible that he hadn't aged? How had no one seen him during all those years? And mainly, how could I be sure that he was really my husband? That's when I had an idea. Ricardo had a very specific scar on his left arm, the result of a bicycle accident in childhood. It was small, but it had a unique shape that I knew perfectly. If this person really was my husband, they would have to have this scar. I asked him to show me his arm. The scar was there, exactly in the right place, with the exact shape I remembered. But still, a part of me refused to completely accept the story. Until something happened that changed my perspective forever. A week after Ricardo's return, we decided to go back together to the trail where he had disappeared. I needed to see with my own eyes the place he had described. We walked along the familiar trail until we reached the point where his jacket had been found years before. Ricardo stopped and looked around as if he were getting his bearings. It's this way, he said, pointing in a direction that I was sure had been searched. During the searches, we followed a path that I swore I had never seen before, despite having travelled that area dozens of times. And then, we reached the clearing he had described. It was there. Exactly as he had told me. A perfectly circular clearing, with a structure of ancient stones in the centre. The stones had strange symbols carved into them, and even in sunlight, they emanated a strange energy, but the structure was off. Without the light that Ricardo had described. It only activates at specific moments, he explained, as if reading my thoughts. I don't know exactly when or why. We stayed there for hours, observing that impossible structure. How was it possible that it had never been found during the searches? How had something so obvious gone unnoticed for so long? When we returned home that night, I knew that my life would never be the same again. No matter how impossible Ricardo's story seemed, I had seen the proof with my own eyes. In the following weeks, we tried to resume our life as if nothing had happened. But it was impossible. I had changed in those 10 years. I had emotional scars, traumas, a different way of seeing the world. And Ricardo, despite being physically identical, was also different. There was a strange wisdom in him, as if he had learned things he couldn't explain. Besides, explaining his return to other people became a nightmare. How to tell the neighbours that my husband had returned after 10 years without aging a day? How to explain to the family that he was alive, but couldn't give details about where he had been? We decided to move to another city, start a new life where no one knew our story. It was the only way to try to rebuild some normalcy. But even so, there were moments when I looked at Ricardo and wondered, is this real? Have I gone crazy, and am I imagining everything? Is he really my husband, or something that just looks like him? One night, about 3 months after his return, I woke up and he wasn't in bed. I searched the whole house and found him in the backyard, looking at the starry sky. Are you okay? I asked. Sometimes I miss that place, he confessed. Not the separation from you, but the peace. The absence of worries, of responsibilities, of pain. This confession scared me deeply. Are you thinking about going back? I don't know if it's my choice, he replied. I don't know if one day I'll simply disappear again without wanting to. This possibility terrified me. The idea that I could lose him again at any moment without warning was almost unbearable. Since then, we live one day at a time. Ricardo went back to work. We got him a job at a small company where no one asked many questions about the 10-year gap in his resume. We try to be happy, but there's always this shadow hanging over us. Sometimes at night I watch him sleeping and wonder if he'll still be there in the morning. Sometimes when he comes home from work a few minutes late, my heart races thinking he's disappeared again. And the question that haunts me most is, if this happened to my husband, how many other people disappeared in the same way? How many families are suffering from disappearances that have no logical explanation? It's been a year since Ricardo returned. He continues exactly the same as the day of his return. He doesn't age, he doesn't change. Sometimes I look at myself in the mirror and see the wrinkles that have begun to appear, the grey hairs, the signs of time. And then I look at him, who continues to be 32 years old, as if time simply refused to touch him. I don't know how much longer this will last. I don't know if one day he will disappear again, or if I will age beside a man who remains eternally young. I don't know if the structure on the trail will activate again, or if more people will disappear. What I know is that there are things in this world that we cannot explain, mysteries that challenge our understanding of reality. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people we love come back to us in ways we never imagined possible. If you know someone who disappeared without explanation, don't give up. Maybe, somewhere beyond our understanding, that person is waiting for the right moment to return. And if one day someone you love comes back in a way that defies all logic, don't question it too much. Just be grateful for the miracle. Because, in the end, love is the only mystery that really matters. And love, like time in that strange place, follows its own rules.